Y'all go. What's up, guys? This is Stancy here. I know stuff on so I'm about to stretchy. I just gotta. So what I'm about to do is wansee entertainment. Looks like I'm gonna be watching. The reason why I watched them too, that the scream that I heard at an empty house and iPad. I watched that before because it started my YouTube quick. It just quit, It just stopped recording YouTube. So we're gonna get this started. If she asks one question, I always say no.
Ah! What a pleasant way to begin my 3 a.m. shift at Mercy Hospital. The first thing I did as I sat down was cut my finger. It was a paper cut. And despite working at one of the largest hospitals in the state, I couldn't find a single band-aid laying around. I sucked on my index finger like a vampire while I scrambled my desk for that band-aid. I found one. Purple. I'm a hospital receptionist, and all that means is I greet visitors, make appointments, and look nice. Well, as nice as a 30-year-old.
Okay, why is this dude talking so fast? He talking really freaking fast. For one, he talking fast. For two, I don't know this dude. He don't sound like none of the wansee entertainment characters. He don't.
Man who hasn't slept in hours can look. That night, as we call it, it was just me and a few nurses on the floor. Other than that, it was ghost quiet, except for the heavy rain. I sat back on the cheap recliner chair all receptionists get the honour of using. While adjusting my band-aid, I listened to the television mounted on the corner of the ceiling as it broadcasted a seemingly important message.
Authorities say the woman was last seen on Cedar Avenue.
I looked up to see if the television was showing any images of this strange woman. None. It was yet another crazy person with no name and no face who we were supposed to look out for. Not creepy at all.
Authorities also say the woman was reportedly walking around and asking people very, very bizarre questions.
I focused back on my desk and continued working, but I still listened as the news anchor went on and on. She continued.
The following statement was issued by an unidentified government official.
Listen carefully, folks. Whatever she asks you, answer no. Do not, under any circumstances, answer yes.
Officials won't comment further as to why, citing security clearance. Police are asking that you immediately call 911 if you deem anyone suspicious.
I thought that part of the coverage was quite odd, but I wasn't sure anything could scare me anymore. Working here at the hospital, I thought I had seen it all. At the flash of the ruby red ambulance lights, I've seen people come in with severed arms, legs, fingers, people who somehow managed to scoop out their eyes, failed suicide attempts, and much, much more. You get used to it. My head was practically sunk into my desk as I filled out paperwork. That's when I heard something very subtle. Initially, I heard it coming from the front doors, the entrance. The automatic doors opened and closed, slamming against each other and sounding an obnoxiously loud thud each time. The very dim lighting I had surrounding my desk flickered incessantly. Hello? I called out, seated behind the safety of my desk. Only the whistling wind responded. Hello? I called out again. I felt obligated to check if someone was there, especially since it might have been someone who was injured and needed our attention. I reluctantly picked myself up from my chair and walked over to inspect. I nearly slipped and cracked my head open as the entrance floor was almost flooded from the rain. I noticed footsteps, wet shoe marks that seemed to come inside the hospital and then back out. I stood near the doors, poking my head outside, and looked. All I heard was the distant sounds of sirens and honking cars. The rain poured harder. The peace and quiet was disturbed within moments of me sitting back down. The automatic doors started again, opening and closing, slamming shut, and letting in more rain as they did. But this time, I heard gentle footsteps make their way towards me, tapping closer and closer. Someone slowly emerged from the darkness between the entrance and front desk. A woman with drenched black hair approached, wearing a dark brown raincoat and a pair of boots that were too large for her toothpick legs. Her face was inundated with wrinkles and wet makeup. Her black eyeshadow smudged. Despite the heavy rain outside, she didn't seem to have bothered wearing her hoodie. Hello, how can I help you, ma'am? She didn't respond. She looked around, scanning and observing an unimpressive hospital. Is there something I can help you with? Still nothing. We engaged in a brief stare down, which she won. I looked down and pretended to gather important paperwork. Are you here to visit someone? Then finally, she responded, without talking. She simply nodded and then took a few steps forward. her hands hanging down her side. Her posture was unnatural, almost uncomfortable. Okay, for now I need you to sign here, then we'll have to wait a few hours for visiting time to begin, I said, pushing forward a sheet of paper and a pen. She raised her arm to sign and then abruptly stopped. She seemed startled by something on the desk. She looked at me, tilted her head and, with a smile that was as wide as her eyes, said, "Would you please move that for me?" I was confused at first, and then she pointed at it with her index finger. As drops of rainwater tapped against my desk while her arm hovered over it. I took the little crucifix we had at the front desk and put it in a drawer. The woman proceeded as if she was going to finally sign the paper and then stop before writing anything. She dropped the pen on the ground and stood there again, staring at me. She asked me a question.
"Do you reject the Trinity?"
"I'm sorry?" I replied. For a few more uncomfortable moments, the woman stood there, like an ancient statue. I had no idea what she meant by the question. "Ma'am, who exactly are you here to see? Family? Friend? What's your relationship with the patient?" Before I could finish talking midway through my question, the woman turned around and walked out the door, still smiling and her eyes as wide as I'd ever seen on a person. I went back to work and tried to move on, but her creepy mannerisms were trapped in my mind throughout the night. At around 4 a.m. I spotted one of the children in our hospital walking down the hall. "Nina, is that you?" I called out. All the kids in the hospital knew me. I was proudly considered one of the cooler employees. I let them break the rules. I brought them snacks upstairs and even told them scary stories, despite their predictable regret later on. The nurses would get angry with me every time I held one of my scary story nights. They always had a bunch of bed sheets to change the next morning. I only did these things for the kids when I wasn't busy, when it was a quiet night. And this was one of those uneventful nights, which of course was a good thing. Anyway, it was very odd to see Nina awake at that time, walking down those shadowy halls. She was absolutely terrified of the dark, and yet there she was. "Nina, is that you?" I squinted my eyes as I walked towards her.
"Sorry, Matt.
She began.
I don't want to be there anymore."
She had dragged her blue blanket along with her, which was her way of gesturing to us that she wanted to move to another room. "The other kids bothering you again?" I asked. I took hold of her hand and began walking her back to the elevator.
"Matt, please, don't make me go back up there. I don't like the new nurse."
I stopped walking. "What?" I said, kneeling to Nina's level.
"She keeps asking us the same question over and over. I said no so many times. I keep telling her no, but everyone else kept laughing with her and saying yes to her. Please, I don't want to go back up."
Nina's words immediately played flashbacks inside my tired, overworked mind. Something about a strange woman going around and asking even stranger questions. I didn't pay enough attention to that broadcast to notice the woman, but even if I had, I thought she'd left the hospital. I ditched the elevator and ran up a flight of daunting stairs, stomping against each step with all the force I could muster. I probably woke up all those sleeping employees. I was so loud. I opened the door to the children's room and couldn't believe my eyes. I checked each room, each one on each floor. I woke up my co-worker nurse and asked about the children. She couldn't find them either. We looked everywhere and put the hospital on lockdown. We set off all possible alarms and other emergency procedures. We didn't find them. All that was left behind were their clothes.
Oh, that's a missing kid. He got 2 minutes. My parking lot nightmare. What? If I ever hit a nightmare parking lot.
It happened on a Friday night. When I came home from work, I texted my friends and told them to grab a drink with me, but they didn't feel like doing anything this weekend. I'm 24, and all my friends started working too, so I understand that they wanted to stay at home, be cozy, and just relax. I was home alone at the time, sitting all by myself, and then something just came to my mind. I just wanted to drive somewhere. So I got in the car again and drove for a while. Then I tried to find a spot to park my car to have a smoke. There was an underground parking lot that was placed in a one-way.
I know this dude, he did not say he wanted to smoke. It's bad for you, bad for your lungs. Your lungs gonna turn black. It's gonna be deeper than this. Just to let y'all know.
Street. It was around 11:30 p.m. Even though it was a big city, there wasn't much activity around this area. After smoking, I walked back to the parking lot through the dark, small streets. But I was getting anxious and thought to myself, what if someone is following me? I'm out here all alone. So I turned up the pace and reached the parking lot. There was nobody at the parking lot, so I was relieved. But at that very moment, someone behind me shouted loudly. I got the chills and the hairs on the back of my head stood up. I slowly turned around and there was this huge guy in a hoodie. He came to me and started talking. He was talking about how he just came out of prison and that his wife changed the locks on the doors. I noticed that his right hand was in the pocket of his hoodie. I swear I saw the outline of an object in that pocket. I immediately thought it was a knife. Crap, this is not supposed to happen. I'm gonna die in here, I thought to myself. With a quivering voice, I told him very politely that I had to run the graveyard shift at work so that I could leave. And that was when his voice started to change. He angrily said, "No, you have to help me." I reached in my pocket and took out $30. That was the only money I had on me, and I just handed it to him. He took the money, but became angrier and shouted, "Hey, man, is this the only money you've brought?" He took another step and was much closer to me. But what happened next was a miracle. A loud sound came from a door that was shut outside the parking lot. He got distracted and turned his head around, and that is when I rushed to the elevators. It was a separate room which was only accessible to people who parked their cars there, because the door could only be opened with the parking receipt. I got into the elevator safely, but then I heard his loud footsteps behind me. I ran to my car, got in and started it. I slowly pulled up to the gate, and it opened. Although I could see the guy charging at me when I tried to get out of the parking lot, it was too late for him. I stepped on the gas and drove away as fast as I could, and it only took me 15 minutes because I was using too much gas. To this day, I can't stop thinking
That's why he need to keep a gun or a knife in his pocket.
about what would have happened if that door outside the parking lot wouldn't have made that loud noise.
You'll be dead. Just let him know that. No, I ain't trying not to watch it.
So before getting into the story itself, I want to give some backstory on something that happened when I was...
Oh, look. Oh, yeah, that would person be.
So before getting into the story itself, I want to give some backstory on something that happened when I was around the age of 9. I grew up in a village called Hotlax in the northern parts of Sweden. The road leading from my school to my home was a long one, where the local authorities had to put up lamps which emitted a very dim blue light. I always felt like a nervous wreck when I had to walk to and from my school. Both because, even with the lamps, the road was very dark, and also because I was bullied, so the bullies could have waited in the woods right next to the road. It was one event that I remembered vividly during the winter of 1999. I'd slept poorly the night before and the math lesson had been killing me, so I barely felt awake when I was beginning to walk home. The lamps were off, which isn't really so weird, as the sensors for the lamps were pretty low, so any kid could have taken a flashlight, put it towards the sensors, and after a few seconds, the lamps would shut down for a few minutes. Since I was so tired, I'd closed my eyes when I started walking. But after walking about 20 meters on this road, I opened my eyes and noticed that the lamps were off, and I stopped. I was getting nervous. I was reasoning with myself and decided to push on. I was 10, and in my youthful arrogance, I thought I had reached the age where my balls should have been as hard as Duke Nukem's. Hotlax is a very quiet village, so I was barely hearing anything except the wind when this happened. To the left of the road is a very thick forest, and suddenly I could just hear this loud scream coming from it. It was very similar to the male scream you can hear in movies when someone's in huge pain. With the speed of Usain Bolt, I ran as fast as I could towards my home without looking back. Now we're jumping to late autumn 2011. My parents were on a trip to the Canary Islands and asked me to move into their house just for the week so I could take care of the dog. The thought of spending a whole week in my old room, listening to my old Mayhem CDs and eating pizza were just too good to be true. I always walked with my dog outside during midnight, because then I didn't have to take him outside again until the late morning hours. This time was no different, except I decided to walk a bit longer, I decided to walk along Oxelvägen and then follow Inimagsvägen towards Norra Hotlagsvägen. There are no lamps on the most parts of Inimagsvägen, so after leaving Oxelvägen, I stopped. I lit a cigar and told my dog to stay close to me. While walking along the road, I was just enjoying the fresh air and listening to the sound of leaves rustling in the trees. There's a pretty big area next to the road where they have chopped down a lot of trees. When I came to that area, my dog stopped and started barking towards the area I described. When I looked towards the area, I could see the silhouette of a person. The only visible parts were the hands. I said, "What the hell," with a pretty loud voice. The person turned around towards me. If I didn't know any better, I could have sworn that only the head and hands turned, as I didn't see any movements at all on the rest of the body.
What? This big old thing looking like Insidious. You know that, I don't know if y'all watched that movie Insidious, but it's an old movie. And he black, and he have a red face. He look like X-Men here, and he got them creepy crawl. That's what it looked like. That's exactly what that looked like.
A white mask. The guy was wearing a white mask with a slit for each of his eyes. My dog started whimpering. The guy raised his right hand with all of his fingers pointing towards me, and he screamed. It sounded like the exact same scream I had heard as a kid walking home from school that afternoon. What must have been survival instincts, I just started running. When I had ran for 20 meters or so, I stopped to see if my dog was still with me, which he was, and then looked towards the spot the guy had stood. He wasn't there. He had moved to the spot where I stood, now with his hands down, but the mask still towards me. I started running again until I got to Norra Hotlagsvägen. I had never been so scared before. When I stopped, I was crying and my whole body was shaking. And then I walked home.
Hey, that story was live. I like that story. Someone broken into our house. Original horror stories like this one.
This story happened when I was only around 9 years old. We lived in a basic 2-story house in a very small village with only about 100 people. Every year, on the 4th of July, our village had the fireworks show and all the people went to the community park to watch it together. But I couldn't go that year because I had just recently broken my arm, and the doctor told me not to go to any public places for about a week, which I was really bummed about. Just to give you a basic layout of our house, our living room was connected to our front door. If you keep walking forward, you would have got into the kitchen, take a left from there, and that's where my room was on the first floor. Anyway, when it was about 8 o'clock p.m., all of my family went to the park. I was in the living room and started watching some cartoons. About half an hour had passed. I was getting tired, so I turned off the TV and went to my bedroom. I took off my glasses and started to doze off soon. I was almost asleep when I heard the front doorknob turning. I thought it was my family getting back from the park, so I got up and looked out of my room.
That girl sound dumb. I mean, she not dumb, but who come back to the park this night? Who come back? Oh, jeez.
I hadn't put my glasses back on, so everything was a bit blurry. But I could see clearly that there was only one person in the window. Seeing that not everybody was in front of the door, I felt a little scared, so I shut my bedroom's door and went back to my bed. But then, I heard the door open and then close. I immediately noticed that I didn't lock the door.
I don't care if your casket like broke. You can just at least like turn around and be like, oh, let me stop.
Which my mom had asked me to do before she left. I wanted to punch myself. Then I heard a faint voice say, "Hello, is anybody home? I have some candy. I can give it to you if you want. Just come out of the room that you're in." I quickly got off my bed and hid under it. I tried to be as quiet as possible, but because of my arm, it hurt so bad that I started crying. At the time, I didn't have a cell phone, so it was impossible to call the police. The man was walking towards the kitchen. Soon, he opened my room's door, and I covered my mouth to not make any noises. I saw the man walk up to my bed and stop. He leaned all the way down slowly, and then I saw his face. He had chapped lips and a really scruffy chin, and he was smiling. My heart dropped. I hit my arm on my bed frame when he grabbed me out from under my bed, and next, he made me stand up. He said, "Why don't you come with me? I have lots of candy at my house," which made me so scared. I couldn't move or say anything but just cried while he stared at my face. He then picked me up and started carrying me outside. I kicked and screamed. He tried to get in the white van. He tried to open the door, and I managed to fall loose and landed right on my back in the grass. I got up as quick as I could and made a run all the way to the park. I found my family and told them everything that just happened to me while crying. My dad called the police as we got in the car to go to the hospital since I felt so much pain in my arm. All that I remember was I had woken up in a hospital bed with a different colored cast on my arm. After that, we got home and the police were still there. They caught the man under my bed. They said that he was probably waiting for me to come back home. He actually had a criminal record of pedophilia, sexual assault, rape, and murder. The police said that he had escaped 2 days ago, and they've been looking for him since. My family has moved to a bigger town since then. I hate to think about what might have happened if I wasn't able to get loose of his grip. But it comes to my mind every day.
She is going to get kidnapped. Just to let y'all know that. Okay. You gonna watch this one? I think it's cool.
My name is Pascal. I'm 22 years old now, but this event happened 3 years ago when I was 19. It happened in the middle of the night when my parents were away for an important company meeting. The company was kind of far away from where we lived, so I stayed home by myself while they were gone. One time, while I was at home alone, I looked out the window randomly and froze. There was a tall man, almost dressed entirely in black. He was wearing a tuxedo and holding a kitchen knife. This guy was standing right outside of the door, looking at me. He wasn't laughing at all, and his head was twitching continuously. "Sir, please get off our property, otherwise I'll call the police." I opened the window and told him. Then the man replied, "Oh, you can do that if you want, as long as you don't look away." Because of this strange attitude, I felt anxious, so I grabbed my cell phone and called the police. But when I looked out the window again, he was gone. At that very moment, I heard footsteps coming from downstairs. I suddenly remembered that I forgot to lock my garden door, so it was still open. I thought I was gonna die at first, But then I pulled myself together. I got my bat and looked down the stairs, slowly, trying not to make a sound. There he was. He was just staring at me. He didn't move, but said, "I told you not to look away." A few moments later, we heard sirens. The man still did not move. But then he suddenly changed his mind and walked over to me. I tried to swing my bat towards him, but I was so scared. I couldn't do anything except scream. The police broke down the door. One policeman tried to arrest him, and the other one tried to take the knife away from him, but the man resisted. He was strong. Even though he was outnumbered, they couldn't stop him. They threatened to shoot him in the foot, but he didn't care. Furthermore, he attacked the two policemen, and they tumbled down to the ground. I ran to one of the rooms and slammed the door shut, but he kicked in the door. When the door opened, I could see his face, and I will never, ever forget that moment. However, at that very moment, the police caught up to him and shot his foot. The guy started screaming in pain. Shortly after that, he managed to jump outside of the window and disappeared. The policemen chased after him, but unfortunately, they failed to arrest him. I never saw that guy again. I'm glad that I survived that incident, but I also feel nervous that he'll come to my house again. From that day on, I always made sure I locked all the doors and windows.
Yeah, he gonna come and kill you again. He gonna try to kill you again. Like, bruh, he just literally, like, just really did that. He really tackled police, and he was that strong. He kicked the door after when he slammed the door. He should, like, even though he locked the door, he still kicked the door and trying to slice him. He shot him in his leg. Oh yeah, this is just fire. Alright, let me start talking. Look, I made a creepiness friend at the deep web, okay.
When I was a teenager, I would often explore the deep web with my friends, specifically weird stuff on Hidden Wiki. There were definitely a lot of links to choose from. I never clicked on the violent links because I'm not into that. My friend Latrice told me to click on one that says, "New best friend." After doing so, it takes you to a page where you have to make a profile. I put the name Lisa on my profile. My real name is Susan. Once I made the profile, you are directed to a main page that has categories. They were silly, serious, smart, and smothering. We clicked smothering. I thought it was funny. After choosing, there was a list of people with their pictures, male and female. I clicked on a profile of a guy that had the name 5, like the number 5. I entered, and it didn't seem like someone who would be a smothering friend. When I was searching through his profile, I received a message from him asking if I were looking for a friend. I looked at Latrice, and she laughed, but also told me to respond yes. So we're messaging back and forth for maybe 30 minutes, and then Latrice had to go. I told him I'll be back on tomorrow, and he said okay. Maybe a week went by where I would talk to him every night. He seemed very nice, so we exchanged numbers so we could talk more. Everything seemed fine until I clicked on another profile and someone else messaged me. I started talking with this other person, but still was texting the guy 5, which I knew his real name now as William. The new guy had the name Bill on his profile. A day went by, and he seemed cool, but then William randomly asked me why I was talking with Bill.
Oh my God.
I didn't know what to say, so I never responded. He kept texting with angry messages, so I blocked him. I didn't receive any texts, only a single message on that site, and it said soon. One day after school, my friend Latrice came over to have a sleepover. We got comfortable when he blocked me from a random number. I replied with a question mark. Then he replied, "It's me, William." He texted me from another number after I blocked him. I told Latrice how creepy this guy is. Then Latrice stopped me from talking because she thought she heard something. Then I heard a voice. I'm not that creepy. We both responded by as she thought she heard something. Then I heard a voice. I'm not that creepy. We both responded by screaming and looking around. I saw someone coming from under my bed, so we ran screaming out of my room, and my mother called the cops. They didn't get him because he left through my window, and nothing could be traced back to him. I'm starting to think that he was both of the people I was talking to. That definitely opened my eyes to the dangers of the internet. I would never visit the dark web again.
Stevie D. I don't want to listen to Stevie D. Alright, so we got a woman in a purple dress.
A few years ago, me and my family went on our yearly holiday to Madeira, which is the birthplace of... A few years ago, me and...
Why is this... Oh, let me move outside. Why is this dude sleeping like that, slobbing all the way back and forth? That man right there, the one I'm pointing...
My family went on our yearly holiday to Madeira, which is the birthplace of my parents. It was pretty normal for us to go annually, as our grandparents were living there. We would sleep in one of our grandparents' home, and during the day, we would go to festivals. If you do not know much about Madeira, then this story will probably give you a better idea. It's not that a physical thing occurred that holiday. It was just this nightmare that became very real for me as a child. As I said before, I was staying at my grandparents' house while in Madeira. I had a room to myself on the upper floor. It was pretty creepy since my grandmother loved Victorian-style dolls. Once I was able to fall asleep, I had a creepy dream that I can't forget. I woke up and from my bed, I could hear movement on the floor. I looked down to see that the floor was covered in black insects, just crawling around. I could not see the almond brown wood floorboards and began to yell for help. Someone opened my door and I saw my little brother come in, but behind him was a woman in a hideous purple dress. I never saw this woman before, but before my brother even came closer to me, I saw the woman force her hand into his back and tear out his heart. I remember screaming in the dream, and all the woman said was, "Your parents aren't here." And I woke up. I was so scared that I went into the next room where my brother should have been asleep. But because it was dark, I couldn't see him. Well, I was a dumb kid. My said, and I started to cry even more. Then I heard my older brother call my name from up the stairs. The stairs I just ran down. I told him I had a bad dream, and he stayed in my room after showing me that my little brother was snoring away in his bed. The next morning, my brother told my parents how I behaved, so my mother asked me what happened. I told her about the dream with the lady in the hideous purple dress. My mother's face became serious, and she looked worried. I didn't know why, since that was unusual for her. About 2 years later, I was going through my parents' wedding album in our home in Madeira, while I was sorting out the top floor of the house with my younger brother. I noticed that one of the pictures was ripped in half. I thought it was unusual, so I began looking through to see where the other half was. It wasn't in the album. I brushed it off. About an hour later, I was going through one of the drawers in the living room cabinet. I saw this picture of a woman in a purple dress. She looked almost identical to the woman in my dream. It was the same dress. I began to get goosebumps, so I put the album on top of a table and opened it to the page with the teared up picture. I began to shiver once the tear of both pictures fit perfectly well together. With worry, I began to ask my mother who was in the image. All I know to this day is that she is perceived as a witch and fled with my maternal uncle from Madeira soon after the whole community began to believe it. This is possibly all just a coincidence, but it does send a shiver down my spine. I've never met this woman, but she appeared in my dreams. I have no idea on whether or not I will forget the specific details of that dream, especially since I found out more about this woman, who is my aunt-in-law.
Oh, she's a bronze pizza. I'm done. Why would she bring pizza? And she know it's like a dangerous thing. I'm gonna play this one because I've never seen this one. Alright, so we got...
This happened about 5 years ago. I was 11 years old, and it was pretty early in the morning. I was in the backyard playing basketball with my younger brother before I headed to school. We had a basketball hoop in our backyard. Our backyard was located next to an alley, and our gate was pretty short, so anyone who walked through that alley could see right into our backyard. After playing for a bit, we noticed that two strange men in the alley were checking out our neighbor's backyard. I didn't feel safe around them, so I led my brother back into the house. We were going to ignore them, but after eyeing them a little longer, my suspicion about them turned out to be right. Watching them from the window, I saw one of them hop right over our tiny gate and was now in our backyard. Then we rushed to go tell our mom. My mom went straight outside to see two strangers standing in our backyard. She yelled at them angrily and told them to go away. She called 911, but they ignored her and didn't leave. One of the men just stared at us. All of a sudden, he went into the shed we had in the backyard and pulled out a lawnmower that was inside. At first, we were all confused and we thought they might be trying to steal it. Then my sister started to record the incident, thinking it might scare them, make them run away. But it didn't work. My mom called 911, and the men weren't saying anything to us. But one of them seemed to have changed his mind and was trying to convince the other man that they should just leave. Then the man who pulled the lawnmower out of the shed turned the lawnmower on. We were totally confused at that moment. A random stranger just comes into our backyard and completely ignores everything we say to him. Why would he go into our shed, pull out a lawnmower, and turn it on? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. However, his next move made even less sense and was even more insane. He flipped the lawnmower upside down and just stood there looking at it. A few seconds later, our confusion soon turned to horror after watching what happened next. He dived headfirst into the spinning blade of the lawnmower, which cut his neck wide open and ended his life. All this happened in the blink of an eye. My mom screamed at the top of her lungs, which frightened the 911 operator. I couldn't believe what I just saw. I was only 11 years old at the time, but it must have been even harder for my younger siblings to watch that happen. A few minutes later, the ambulance and the cops arrived at the backyard. The police came by to ask a few questions, but the video my sister took had the whole incident on video. So the cops knew the story was legit. I couldn't help but feel bad for the other man that was with him. When the incident happened, he screamed too, started crying and begged us to call for help. But it was already too late. I didn't go to school that day because I was in shock. After that, I couldn't sleep at all. I had nightmares for a while. I wished we'd never saw that and wondered what happened to that man to make him want to end his life. I also couldn't stop thinking about our lawnmower. It was old and worn out. You needed to pull the cord multiple times, and with some luck, it might turn on. But he pulled that thing once, and it started right up. Everything was odd that day.
Heck nah. Oh, heck nah. This is the last story, y'all. So, yep, this is the last one. And then we're going to be doing all this wansee entertainment stories.
This happened when I was at college, studying acting.
I like her story.
I exercise regularly, doing yoga, tennis, and most of all, running. My favorite places to run were on the beach and in the woods as I loved nature and being alone. All my friends had boyfriends, and I was single at the time, so I felt a little lonely. One day, after I logged onto Instagram and saw that someone had sent me a message, I checked out his profile. His name was Mason. According to his bio, he was a football player at a college near mine. His photos consisted of him playing football, hanging with his friends, and he had a muscular build, but also a little bit chubby. Eventually, I decided to accept his request, but I just ignored lots of DMs from him and went about my day. Later at lunch, my friends pushed me to start a conversation with Mason, and I did. And turns out we got along with each other well. We talked about fitness, movies, books, and college, a lot of common things. I told him about running in the woods and on the beach, and he told me I was cute and had a good body. He had also asked me if we could meet sometime. He seemed nice, but I was unsure. A couple of days later, I went out for a run around 6 a.m. Although it was an early morning, outside it was really hot, so I wore a sports crop top and shorts. I was confident with my body anyway. As I went outside, I noticed there was a black car parked outside. I looked closer and could see someone looking at me. And when I left the woods at the same place where I went in, I noticed the same black car was parked nearby. I was scared. I started running back to my dormitory. As I looked back, I noticed the car wasn't following me. I calmed down a little bit and got ready for the first lesson. I checked Instagram and saw that Mason had messaged me. He told me he wanted to wrestle me. I thought nothing of it and just texted back, "Sounds fun," with a winky face. As I was just about to leave my dorm for the first lesson, he messaged me again, asking to meet me at his dorm at his college and that he wanted to meet me because he loved me. I felt bad as I wasn't interested in a relationship. I sent him a message back telling him that I wasn't interested in it and just wanted to stay friends. Throughout the rest of the day, Mason didn't message me back. I started to feel bad, but I thought I'd wait a couple of days to message him back to ask if he was okay. The next morning, I went for my daily run. I put on my crop top and shorts and went outside. The black car wasn't around at my dorm, and neither was it outside the woods, so I felt safe. I ran through the woods. It was hot, and I had already run quite a bit. I ran along this trail, and no one was around me. That was until a figure jumped out from behind a tree, a meter in front of me, shouting, "Surprise!" It was Mason. I asked him what he was doing and how he found me. He said that he became impatient and just wanted to meet me. He had parked his car nearby, so we could go on a date, he said. I was sure it was the same black car as before, and I was surprised and pretty nervous. I told him it was a little weird to just surprise me like this, but he ignored me and walked up close to me. He told me I was so pretty, and he touched my cheek. I felt uncomfortable and told him, "Sorry, Mason. You're a nice guy, but I'm not interested in a relationship." I tried to push him away, telling him to leave me alone. And that's when he wrapped his arms around my waist and started squeezing me. He was very strong, and it was so tight, it hurt a lot. I told him to get off of me and tried to push him off again, but he was so much stronger than me. He squeezed much tighter. I was in pain and couldn't breathe. I couldn't even shout for help. Mason started trying to kiss and even lick me as he was crushing me. I kept on struggling. Eventually, I felt myself passing out as I was dizzy and started to black out. In desperation, I bit down on Mason's nose and scratched at his eyes. He said, "Let go of me, bitch," and pushed me down as he held his face. As I got my breath back, I got up and started and scratched at his eyes. He said, "Let go of me, bitch," and pushed me down as he held his face. As I got my breath back, I got up and started sprinting out of the woods. Finally, I got to college and told my friends what happened, and then explained it to the police. I wanted to press charges and a restraining order on him. They told me they'll investigate it as soon as possible. I heard about Mason was after his trial. It turns out that he was kicked out of his college for assaulting another girl a month before. The police also found out he had planned on kidnapping me as he had a notebook about me and what he wanted to do with me and other women, which includes some of the vilest things. How he wanted to kill women in several different ways and violate the bodies afterward. He even wrote at length about how he wanted to squeeze a woman to death with his arms. I threw up when I found out. Though it may sound unlikely, it is possible to murder someone by squeezing them hard and long enough, preventing them from breathing and causing asphyxiation. Considering how strong he was and how small I am, I'm certain he could have killed me. As far as I know, he's still in prison or in a mental institution. Good riddance. After what happened, I started training in martial arts and started lifting weights. I've never spoken to people I don't know on social media, and I never went into the woods alone again. Sometimes I still think about what happened to me and how it could have ended differently. I do not doubt that Mason could have squeezed me to death. What I want to know is what he would have done with me afterwards.
I'm gonna end it right there. Alright. If y'all, I'm gonna make a video about this app that I download. It's called Mix Play. And before I end the video, so dang, somebody won. Somebody won that 10,000 units. I'm sorry. But why he gotta win? I was begging for that. Bruh. See, I'm mad. Bruh. I'm so mad. I'm winning this challenge. I'm winning freaking this challenge. Okay, misplay, you play games, and then you get points, then you earn points, and you buy this. So, I know I'm not about to buy this Amazon gift card, because I got eBay, and I'm trying to get this eBay gift card, so. Hey, y'all should hit that subscribe button. Comment down below if y'all think Autumn wants some entertainment, what is the words was scary. So I know it was a long video, and I always will see y'all. I will always see y'all in the next video. Gotta be